Hello, guys. Welcome to Psych Minds. We are reading a new book, Candide by Voltaire. If you have not subscribed yet, do subscribe to the channel. It's a novella written in 1759 by a French philosopher whose original name was Francis Marie Arouet. So, since some words in the novella would be difficult to pronounce, maybe for me, I would try to, but it may be a wrong pronunciation. So, bear with me, and I apologize in advance for the same. Let's start with the introduction. Ever since 1759, when Voltaire wrote Candide in ridicule of the notion that this is the best of all possible worlds, this world has been a rare place for readers. Voltaire wrote it in 3 days, and 5 or 6 generations have found that its laughter does not grow old. Candide has not aged. Yet how different the book would have looked if Voltaire had written it 150 years later than 1759. It would have been, among other things, a book of sights and sounds. A modern writer would have tried to catch and fix in words some of those Atlantic changes which broke the Atlantic monotony of that voyage from Candice to Buenos Aires. When Martin and Candide were sailing the length of the Mediterranean, we should have had a contrast between naked, scarped, Balearic cliffs and headlands of Calabria in their mists. We should have had quarter distances, far horizons, the altering silhouettes of an Ionian island. Colored birds would have filled Prague with their silver or acid cries. Dr. Pangloss, to prove the existence of design in the universe, says that noses were made to carry spectacles, and so we have spectacles. A modern satirist would not try to paint with Voltaire's quick brush the doctrine that he wanted to expose, and he would choose a more complicated doctrine, that Dr. Pangloss's optimism. Would study it more closely, feel his destructive way about it with a more learned and caressing malice. His attacks, stealthier, more flexible, and more patient than Voltaire's, would call upon us, especially when his learnings got a little out of control, to be more than patient. Now and then he would bore us. Candide never bored anybody except William Wordsworth. Voltaire's Men and Women point his case against optimism by starting high and falling low. A modern could not go about it after this fashion. He would not plunge his people into an unfamiliar misery. He would just keep them in the misery they were born to. But such an account of Voltaire's procedure is as misleading as the plaster cast of a dance. Look at his procedure again. Mademoiselle Cunegonde, the illustrious Westphalian, sprung from a family that could prove 71 quarterings, descends and descends until we find her earning her keep by washing dishes in the Propontis, the aged faithful attendant, victim of 100 acts of rape by Negro pirates, remembers that she is the daughter of a pope, and that in honor of her approaching marriage with the Prince of Massacarara, of all Italy wrote sonnets, of which not one was passable. We do not need to know French literature before Voltaire in order to feel, although the lurking parody may escape us, that he is poking fun at us and at himself. His laughter at his own methods grows more unmistakable at the last, when he caricatures them by casually assembling 6 fallen monarchs in an inn at Venice. A modern assailant of optimism would arm himself with social pity. There is no social pity in Candide. Voltaire, whose light touch on familiar institutions opens them and reveals their absurdity, likes to remind us that the slaughter and pillage and murder which Candide witnessed among the Bulgarians was perfectly regular, having been conducted according to the law and usages of war. Had Voltaire lived today, he would have done to poverty what he did to war. Pitying the poor, he would have shown us poverty as a ridiculous anachronism, and both the ridicule and the pity would have expressed his indignation. Almost any modern essaying a philosophic tale would make it long. Candide is only a Hamlet and a half long. It would hardly have been shorter if Voltaire had spent 3 months on it instead of those 3 days. A conciseness to be matched in English by nobody except Pope, who can say plagiarizing enemy steals much, spends little, and has nothing left. A conciseness which Pope toiled and sweated for came as easy as wit to Voltaire. He can afford to be witty, parenthetically, by the way, prodigally without saving, because he knows there is more wit where that came from. One of Max Beerbohm's cartoons shows us the young 20th century going to top speed and washed by two of his predecessors. Underneath is this legend. The grave misgivings of the 19th century and the wicked amusement of the 18th in watching the progress, or whatever it is, of the 20th. This 18th century snuff taking and malicious is like Voltaire, who nevertheless must know, if he happens to think of it, that not yet in the 20th century, not for all its speed mania, has anyone come near to equaling the speed of a prose tale by Voltaire. Candide is a full book. It is filled with mockery, with inventiveness, with things as concrete as things to eat in coins. It has time for the neatest intellectual clickings. It is never hurried, and it moves with the most amazing rapidity. It has the rapidity of high spirits playing a game. The dry high spirits of this destroyer of optimism make most optimists look damp and depressed. Contemplation of the stupidity which deems happiness possible almost made Voltaire happy. His attack on optimism is one of the gayest books in the world. Gaiety has been scattered everywhere up and down its pages by Voltaire's lavish hand, by his thin fingers. Many propagandist satirical books have been written with Candide in mind, but not too many. Today, especially when new faiths are changing the structure of the worlds, faiths which are still plastic enough to be deformed by every disciple, each disciple for himself, and which have not yet received the final deformation known as universal acceptance. Today, Candace is an inspiration to every narrative satirist who hates one of these new faiths, or hates every interpretation of it but his own. Either hatred will serve as a motive to satire. That is why the present is one of the right moments to republish Candide. Candide. I hope it will inspire younger men and women, the only ones who can be inspired, to have a try at Theodore, or militarism, Jane, or pacifism at so and so, the pragmatist or the Freudian. And I hope too that they will, without trying, hold their pens with an 18th century lightness, not inappropriate to a philosophic tale. In Voltaire's fingers, as Anatole France has said, the pen runs and laughs. Philip Littell. These are the content. Chapter 1 to chapter 19, 20. Okay. Chapters are there. Voltaire's Candide. Henceforth, I will be pronouncing it Candide because that's the correct pronunciation, as we have just checked. Candide, Chapter 1. How Candide was brought up in a magnificent castle, and how he has expelled thence. In a castle of Westphalia, belonging to the Baron of Thunder Ten Tronche, lived a youth whom nature had endowed with the most gentle manners. His countenance was a true picture of his soul. He combined a true judgment with simplicity of spirit, which was the reason I apprehend of his being Candide. The old servants of the family suspected him to have been the son of Baron's sister by a good, honest gentleman of the neighborhood, whom that young lady would never marry because he has been able to prove only 71 quarterings. The rest of his genealogical tree having been lost through the injuries of time. The Baron was one of the most powerful lords in Westphalia, for his castle had not only a gate but windows. His great hall even was hung with tapestry. All the dogs of his farmyards formed a pack of hounds at needs. At need, his grooms were his huntsmen, and the curate of the village was his grand almoner. They called him my lord and laughed at all his stories. The Baron's lady weighed about 350 pounds and was therefore a person of great consideration, and she did the honours of the house with a dignity that commanded still greater respect. Her daughter Cunegonde was 17 years of age, fresh coloured, comely, plump, and desirable. The Baron's son seemed to be in every respect worthy of his father. The preceptor Pangloss was the oracle of the family, and little Candide heard his lessons with all the good faith of his age and character. Pangloss was professor of metaphysico, theologico, cosmolo, nigology. He proved admirably that there is no effect without a cause, and that in this best of all possible worlds, the Baron's castle was the most magnificent of castles, and his lady the best of all possible baronesses. It is demonstrable, said he, that things cannot be otherwise than as they are. For all being created for an end, all is necessarily for the best end. Observe that the nose has been formed to bear spectacles. Thus we have spectacles. Legs are visibly designed for stockings, and we have stockings. Stones were made to be hewn and to construct castles. Therefore, my lord has a magnificent castle, for the greatest baron in the province ought to be the best lodged. Pigs were made to be eaten, therefore we eat pork all the year round. Consequently, they who assert that all is well have said a foolish thing. They should have said all is for the best. Candide listened attentively and believed innocently, for he thought Miss Cunegonde extremely beautiful, though he never had the courage to tell her so. He concluded that after the happiness of being born of Baron of Thunder Ten Tronch, the second degree of happiness was to be Miss Cunegonde, the third that of seeing her every day, and the fourth that of hearing Master Pangloss, the greatest philosopher of the whole province, and consequently of the whole world. One day, Cunegonde, while walking near the castle in a little wood which they called a park, saw between the bushes Dr. Pangloss giving a lesson in experimental natural philosophy to her mother's chambermaid, a little brown wench, very very pretty and very docile. As Miss Cunegonde had a great disposition for the sciences, she breathlessly observed the repeated experiments of which she was a witness. She clearly perceived the force of the doctor's reasons, the effects and the causes. She turned back greatly flurried, quite pensive, and filled with the desire to be learned, dreaming that she might well be a sufficient reason for young Candide, and he for her. She met Candide on reaching the castle and blushed. Candide blushed also. She wished him good morrow in a flattering tone, and Candide spoke to her without knowing what he said. The next day after dinner, as they went from table, Cunegonde and Candide found themselves behind a screen. Cunegonde let fall her handkerchief. Candide picked it up. She took him innocently by the hand. The youth as innocently kissed the young lady's hand with particular vivacity, sensibility, and grace. Their lips met, their eyes sparkled, their knees trembled, their hands strayed. Baron Thunder Ten Tronch passed near the screen, and beholding this cause and effect, chased Candide from the castle with great kicks on the backside. Cunegonde fainted away. She was boxed on the ears by the Baroness as soon as she came to herself, and all was consternation in this most magnificent and most agreeable of all possible castles. Okay, that was a scandal. That brings us to the end of chapter 1. We will continue with chapter 2 in our next reading. Bye bye for now. Keep reading. Take care. And if you have any comments on the content we just read or the previous recordings that I have done or anything at all, you want to give a feedback, suggestion, recommendation, anything at all, you can reach out in the comment section of the video you're viewing or in the community section of the YouTube channel. Bye bye, take care, and keep reading. Bye.